Alright guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to go over a pretty entertaining email that was sent from a subscriber. This from a guy. He describes himself as, I guess, a late stage baby boomer, so I'm guessing he's probably somewhere in his mid to late 60s. And he's writing in, like I said, a pretty entertaining email talking about today, things in the past, and how his childhood was vastly different than typical kids today, and how that childhood shaped him in his generation versus how the childhood of today's kids are shaping them to be the type of adults that they are. In other words, his childhood, although tough, was much more beneficial, while the ones nowadays, when parents want to be the kid's best friend and there's no discipline or consequences and where things are. That'd be a pretty good one to go over here, making some very valid points about old school versus how things are today. And perhaps a warning to the many parents out there, they better change their ways of raising their kids, or otherwise things will get pretty worse. And that'd be a pretty funny one to go over here, because the description of his childhood reminds you so much of mine, because I spent so much of my childhood, from 9 years old till high school, living in rural Pennsylvania in the country. And obviously it was a very much more conservative area, and it was pretty entertaining hearing all these things that went on his day as went on with mine, and how it impacted him and me for the long term. It's a pretty good one. I think a lot of you guys will find pretty entertaining, particularly you older guys out there. He says, hello SSM. You do great work and are providing an invaluable public service. Well, thank you, sir. I'm the last of the baby boomers, and I've noticed lately you've run some stories from us older guys and imparted wisdom that used to be called common sense. I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring. Some time ago, you came up in my feed while I was replacing the starter on my wife's van. If my memory serves me right, it was a story about a guy who was fishing with his future father and brother-in-law and found that his future sister-in-law's boyfriend used to be his fiance's boyfriend, and the shitstorm that followed. I remember that story very well. It was a multi-part story. I soon became hooked in your videos, and lately I've been thinking, damn, I wish someone would have told me this stuff when I was young. Certainly could have saved me a lot of pain in the ass. The world we live in today is nothing like it used to be, and not for the better. Back in the day, the goal was to offend someone, and a man talking about his feelings would have gotten him an ass whooping. Over the weekend, my wife and I went to IKEA to pick up a few things. I was sitting just watching people and was appalled by what I saw. There was a sea of overweight, effeminate men with full beards and their hair flipped. Those guys would not have survived my world. I'm appalled by what I see anytime I go out, man. Yeah. I like to contrast my youth with today to help understand the stark difference. In my day, it was literally survival of the fittest. If you were not willing to fight, you had to be able to outrun everyone, but if you ran, you had to run every day, because you were now a target and eventually someone would catch you. Most fathers told their sons that if you didn't win the fight, then I'm going to kick your butt when you get home. Once you stood up to someone bigger than you and kicked their butt, you were left alone from the point forward. The police were not called, nobody got prosecuted, there were no lawsuits, and you learned to be a man and respect it. Exactly. Now, should any kids go through that, getting beat up and bullied? Of course not. The thing is, going through that really teaches you to be a man or a mouse. And yeah, if there's a bully, if you don't fight back, they're going to just see that as weakness, and more will attack. And that will go carry with you your whole life. And it's no different in terms of relationships. If you don't stand up for yourself to a bully or someone taking advantage of you, it's only going to make things worse. Or on the world stage, if a nation isn't standing up for itself and enforcing boundaries, that will encourage others to pull more BS. That's why you need to have strong leaders, not these weak candy asses, kumbaya types that just keep letting abuse happen. I'm sure you guys can connect the dots if you look at the world stage right now and things that are going on when people don't stand up for themselves and enforce boundaries. Lives are lost, or lives are put in jeopardy. And I'm sure you guys can connect the dots what I'm talking about here. Obviously, we had much rougher upbringing than could be understood today. I have kids ranging in age of 30 years old to 15, and at no point in our lives have they said that there was a fight at school. That is a positive thing in certain ways and a negative thing in certain ways. In my youth, the walk home from school was like prey and predator on the African plain. That was my childhood, man. Today, almost nobody I know walks to school, and really, with all the pervs out there, I wouldn't want them to, especially girls. We could run the street 24/7 and never have to worry about being abducted or something worse by an adult. That said, all the adults knew who your parents were and would tell on you if you did something wrong, and you had the belt waiting for you when you got home. Yep, takes a village to raise a child, and believe me, as a kid, that belt was waiting for me many a times, and that taught me to not do that particular thing again until I found some other dumbass thing to do, and the belt was waiting for me. One of my kids' teachers told them that if your parents ever hit you, then tell her, and she will call the police and social services. Yes, it was a violent world that often went too far, but taught kids respect and how to behave. It did, in many situations, go too far. There's always a balance, guys. But kids need to know there are consequences. And this generation, and the definitely millennial and definitely Gen Z, don't know what consequences are. And it's the parents that are the problem. The parents, the schools that decided in the 80s and 90s to become the kid's best friend and encourage the kids to be sensitive and cry, boys, and participation trophies, and no need to compete, and all these things. No. And of course, they didn't discipline them when they needed to. That's the problem. My father was from the old generation, and my mom, oh no. There was an ass whooping if I got out of line. The following are some of the adventures from my childhood. This is my favorite part of his story. When I was a toddler, I broke my arm and spent the summer smacking my brother in the head with my cast. We had a little game where if you were not paying attention, you got a swift punch to the jewels. One day while driving in our station wagon with the rumble seat, my brothers and I were roughhousing in the back. My dad gave the warning, "Don't make me stop this car." At that moment, one of my brothers got a clear and unobstructed shot of the jewels on my one other brother. He cried, my dad stopped the car, and I got an ass whooping. My brother who committed the violation was silent. Sometime later, I got revenge. We got a croquet set from someone. We made up our own rules, and my brother was a cheater. We got into an argument, and I threw his ball across the road. He ran to tell my parents. I threw the croquet mallet like I was axe throwing and caught Ridget between the shoulder blades, and he went down. He got up and ran to my dad and screamed at him to whip me with the belt. My dad was not going to take orders from a kid, so he whipped my brother with the belt. Another time I was riding my bike and 100 or so feet away from my brother, and he wanted to know if he could hit a moving target with a rock. He caught me right in the forehead. These are classic boys will be boys situations that the parents, you want to smack them upside the head, but you're also laughing at boys being boys. This is the type of crap that I used to do with my friends and cousins and all that stuff growing up. Not exactly like this, but you get the point. Another time I was riding my bike. I read that part. A few days later, my brother was in the neighbor's yard, so I chucked a rock at him. While my arm was off and it busted out the neighbor's garage window, yep, I got the belt. I once shot out my dad's truck window accidentally with a BB gun, and believe me, I got in so much shit because of that. Oh my God. It was an accident, and I really felt bad. My brother tried to ride off on my bike. I saw him, and the chase ensued. I got close enough to put a stick in the rear spokes. He went flying across the handlebars, and when he stopped rolling, I dove on him. He tried to block me with his foot, and I drove his knee into his chin and knocked him unconscious, then dragged him home by his foot through a gravel parking lot. Boys will be boys. We used to go into the fields and have dirt-clawed fights, and none of the sissy stuff aiming for the body. We were aiming for the head. We used to go into the woods, each at a different point, enter at the same time, and had to do a count of 200. We were on our honor to do the count because we all knew roughly how far we could get on the count, and if anyone cheated, God help them. The game was to hunt each other with our BB guns. We did have a rule to not off anyone in the head, because if someone lost an eye, like our parents said we would, it'd be difficult to explain it to them, and if you shot someone in the head, your head was the target for everyone else the rest of the day. Of course, we had an unspoken agreement to never tell our parents, because if we did that, all of us were in hot water. Yep, in the early 90s, when I was like 13, 14, we couldn't get paintball guns. They were too expensive. So all my friends, we had BB guns, and the rule was that, of course, there was no headshots, and you could crank it one time. That's it. No more than that. And we were wearing camo, and we were pretending it was the movie Predator, and in the woods in the summertime, Pennsylvania, and we would fucking hunt each other. It was hilarious. Who was the last man standing? And let me tell you, those motherfuckers pumped it up more than once, I guarantee you. Anyway, that's what we did. And thank God nobody lost an eye or anything like that. But just, we were juveniles. Boys will be boys. It toughened us. Both my brother and I had to go to the mayor's court for shooting out street lights with our BB guns. My dad had an old car sitting in the yard for years that didn't run, and one day I was shooting birds with my BB gun. Come on, dude, not cool. I'm an animal lover here. And shot out the back window of his car. I got the belt that day. We had a neighbor who shot our dog with a BB gun, so we stuffed a potato in the tailpipe of his car, and when it shot out of the tailpipe, the potato went through the glass in his front door. And another day, we mixed up every flammable fluid we could find, and we poured it on the decorative rocks he had in his front yard and set them on fire. Yeah, my friends and I went through our pyro phases too. It's amazing that I have all my fingers and don't look like Freddy Krueger. If anyone had worn a helmet while riding a bike when they would have been the laughing stock of the town for years. Yes. We rode our bikes everywhere and even made some pretty impressive ramps pretending to be Evel Knievel. Yes, people wiped out often, but just got up and walked it off. Cuts and bruises were ignored. When someone got a gash in their head and it was squirting blood, then we'd find an adult. We were always making ramps with our bikes and ramps in the snow with our sleds and falling off and hitting ourselves, and you just get up and walk it off. You don't go crying home to mommy. You can see the kids today doing this stuff. Honest to God, this is hilarious. This is the same things I did as a kid, and a lot of you guys probably did who were 40 on up. We were in the woods building a fort out of fallen trees, and while cutting a branch with a saw, I hit the artery in my thumb, and blood squirted like a drinking fountain. I wrapped a piece of cloth around until the bleeding stopped and resumed the fort. See? There were older kids in town that liked to bully the younger kids, so we came within a couple brilliant ideas. First was to build a fort and tied ropes to it and strung it up in the air between two trees. We made a rope ladder to get it up. Building forts was so awesome as a kid. Oh, God, I had so many forts. Tree houses, lean-tos, everything was awesome. Well, one day we went to the woods to play in the fort and found that someone cut the rope and our fort was just a pile of sticks. Oh, not cool. It's war. Good thing nobody was in there when they cut it down, because they would have absolutely still cut it down if someone were in there. We then had another fort in a small thicket and devised a plan. We knew the bullies were going to try to destroy it, so we cut the branches off a small tree, bent it to the ground, rigged a tripwire, and nailed a metal pie plate to it. We covered it with some brush and sat a ways to watch. When the older kids came to destroy our fort, one of them got the metal pie plate in the face. We laughed our asses off and ran as fast as we could. Kind of reminds me of, like, I'm thinking like The Sandlot. That movie from the 90s is hilarious. There was an obese kid in town who everyone called Fat Boy, and he never got offended, or at least never told anybody he was. Well, I'm sure he didn't like it, but that probably motivated him to do something about that. There was also a very tall obese gal in town. Everybody called her Black Cow, and I never heard anyone say she was offended. I'm sure she was hurt by that too, but again, handled it differently. One day after school, about 6 kids jumped me while walking home. It just so happened my dad was driving by in his car. He got out and pointed to the biggest kid and said, "You kick his ass or I'm taking the belt when you get home." Well, I won the fight. I was playing baseball in the yard with my brothers and some other kids. Don't remember what happened, but I got into an argument with my brother. He ran and tried hiding behind my sister. I thought, okay, I'm going to take you out too if I have to. I swung, she ducked, and I clocked my brother in the left eye. He went down for a couple of minutes. We used to tie fishing line to a wallet and leave it in the middle of the street and hide in the bushes, holding onto the string. When someone would stop their car and reach for the wallet, we would give the string a tug until they caught on and gave up. You guys are rascals. I know this all sounds like we grew up in a war zone that people today cannot imagine, but there were good times too. Dude, I hear a lot of good times within the bad times here in these stories. This is my freaking childhood, man. And yes, walking the bus to and from school, that was a war zone. And walking home from school, the mile to my house, because you actually walked to the bus stop back in those days, was a war zone. And I had to fight too. End of story. Some I won, some I lost, but respect was gained by you fighting back. And typically that'd be the end of it. It says here, Just being free to play outside with no worries, and to come in when my dad did his special whistle. We didn't always fight. We played whatever sport was in season, and we had great times playing in the snow. Walking through the fields in spring, smelling the wildflowers, chasing the wild quail, walking to the pond to catch as many bluegills as you could carry, laying on our backs in the daytime, coming up with creative things like the clouds look like, and at night trying to identify the different star constellations. Right. Except my childhood, we were going back in each other's houses on our bikes playing, Nintendo and Super Mario 3. When Super Mario 3 came out, nobody could leave the freaking Nintendo until our parents said, go out and fucking play. The good old days. And in the country, we'd have fireworks, and we're setting off bottle rockets and making bottle rocket launchers by getting a PVC pipe over our shoulder and launching the bottle rockets out and stupid shit like that. It was awesome growing up. I'd have a lot of fun going back in time, being 13 for a day and doing all that all over again. Camping in the woods overnight with no adults. We learn amazing life skills that the kids today really can't begin to understand. Nobody held grudges, nobody got shot or stabbed, and to this day we are still friends. All right. I learned to make a fire when I was 10 years old, and I couldn't stop until I learned to make it. I was like Tom Hanks in Castaway. I wasn't doing it rubbing sticks together, but I used magnesium starters, learning to use the proper no paper, those types of things to start a fire. Basic skills. How to get a lean-to set up to protect yourself from rain and bad weather, and just other little things, learning about the right plants. These are things you learn in the country as a kid. Imagine if I took one of those guys I saw at IKEA to the woods for a weekend. Yeah, exactly. He says, women were so different. OMG, are they ever different? We did have a town bicycle, and everyone knew riding it, included me, but that town bicycle got married after high school and has been married for over 30 years. It was so much harder to get in a girl's pants back then because their fathers taught them self-respect and moral values. Us guys still had to have that private, what are your plans with my daughter conversation with the girl's father, and you couldn't very well tell him you just want to pump and dump. Men had to work hard to get a girl in those days, but don't misunderstand. They played the same mind games back then that they do right now. Exactly. If you were going to go off and say that girls are different, no. Men and women are the same, doesn't make a difference what time period it is. And right here, they played the same games. Except back then, the values were a lot better, if you will, like you described. But the same bullshit games and tactics and manipulation and, happened back then. He says, they gave you shit tests, but the difference between now and then is most men called them on their nonsense, where today men have been taught to fold when they get those shit tests. Exactly. The men that folded back in the day were the lonely men because women lost all respect for them. Sound like today? Like today, all the women talk, and there were girls' clubs, so whatever you did with a girl, that in a couple days, they all would know, and probably a bit of an embellished story. So that in itself was a way to make men behave. In my town, there was one kid with a divorced mom, and everyone felt sorry for him. He turned out to be a drug addict and a criminal. Often some of the younger men in town would try to hit on the married woman, and those the guys quickly ran out of town. Almost all women are what they call today traditional wives. Nobody virtue signaled about being a traditional wife. It's just a normal thing to do. Divorce is almost unheard of. Yeah, nowadays everybody's virtue signaling everywhere and putting on the big show on social media and all that. Notice the people that, it's amazing to me. Actually not. The people that could virtue signal for whatever that is, they're not doing that. It's like people that really have a lot of money, they don't have to flaunt it. But people that want everybody to think they have a lot of money are trying to flaunt things all the time. It's the same thing right here with a good thing going, like a traditional wife, whatever. The school disciplined kids, and they had the wooden paddles. Yes, some teachers got out of hand with the paddle, but the word was if you got paddle at school, you were getting another when you got home, so there was checks and balance systems there. I went to a private school in California until I moved when I was 9 years old. And in the first grade, I was repeatedly getting in trouble. They sent me to the principal's office, and I got the ruler, me and my buddy. And the principal whacked the hell out of us. My butt was sore all day. And then I got home, and my parents, they called my parents, and then my dad got the belt out. And I got the belt from my dad. 2 whoopings in one day. Do you think I pulled that crap again that got me in trouble that day? No. And I was 6, maybe 7 years old at the time in the first grade. Yeah. Now, yes, places could get out of control. There's always balance. Schools actually educated kids back then. We learned actual life skills. We learned how to cook, mend clothes, do taxes, balance a checkbook, work on cards. We had woodshop. The farmer kids had vocational agriculture. We learned about history, and it was colorblind history. We learned about civics and how the government works. Imagine that. Useful skills and knowledge being taught to the kids in the school system. What a crazy idea. By the way, we are a constitutional republic and we have never been a democracy. Well, I know that, and a lot of people know that, but a lot of people don't know that. Democracy is just another name for dictatorship. Some kids went to another school to learn carpentry, plumbing, electrician, etc. Most fathers taught their sons how to fix just about anything, and their mothers taught their girls how to cook, clean, and home economics. If this was done in school today, people would lose their effing minds. I know, exactly, and look at the state of things. We complain about the millennials, Gen Z, and whatever the current generation is, but we must understand these kids are victims of society. Yes, most of the criticism about them are 100% on target, but how did that happen? Let's start with parenting. Somewhere in the 80s, parents were taught to be their kids' best buddy. Don't criticize them because it will hurt their self-esteem, and never use corporal punishment. Well, I think the corporal punishment should be a last option, but it's there. Kids need to know consequences, but kids have, since definitely the 90s and on, don't know consequences. And again, I agree with the whole parents being the kid's best buddy. Yeah, that doesn't work. The parent's job is to prepare a kid for the tough world. If they can be their friend and a good parent at the same time, that's nice. But you have to choose between a hard ass being a best buddy, you be the hard ass. Both my parents, military, were hard asses. My mom was easier because I'm a boy, so my mother was easier on me. My dad, especially when I became a teenager, was very tough. And there were times I questioned his love for me, but later on I realized he did love me. But he had to be a hard ass to get through my thick skull as a rascal teenager who did a lot of crap like this guy did. The only time my parents, particularly my dad, ever softened up was when we went to Disneyland. Disneyland in California or Disney World in Florida. Then my dad we'd have fun. But the second we left, boom, military dad was back. Just how it was. I didn't appreciate my dad and his toughness until I was at least in my 20s, if not 30s. That's when I really connected. He stopped being a hard ass when I was 20 years old, when he could see I graduated high school at 18 and was doing well in school and was finding my path and was becoming an adult and worked hard and was making money whenever I could. Then he stopped being the tough dad and he became my friend. Because you could become my friend at 20 years old because I was an adult at that point. But not when I was a kid. He goes on, it says here, in my youth, it was rare that we got to go to a store or restaurant, but if we did, we were on our best behavior because we knew the consequences. Today, parents let their kids scream bloody murder in stores and completely ignore them. Kids have no fear of consequences. Recently, a group of 8 kids attacked and killed a middle-aged man in a racially motivated attack. None of the witnesses said they could identify the kids. The media didn't cover it, and the city's mayor is ignoring it. Of course, and I can think of the reasons why, but I can't say it here on YouTube. It's absurd. But yes, how many times have you guys been in stores or restaurants when the kids are raising hell or they're playing their electronic devices because the parents can't say, put down your phone or whatever, we're going to talk as a family, or at least use a coloring book or something, and the parents let them run wild. I don't tolerate that shit, and I've gotten to some, well, you can say altercations, if you will, in restaurants when I put parents in their places. It doesn't always work end well, and maybe some of you guys have been in that situation. Or airplanes. Well, I don't have any problems in airplanes because when I fly now, I fly first class. A little perk for my hard work. I use points and I apply to getting upgrades to first class. And generally in first class, when you fly, by and large, people are in their best behavior. Yeah, I know. First class. I'll admit that's the one thing. That's the one splurge I do, but because I don't want to deal with fucking people. The people in first class on a plane are usually much more better behaved. But yes, wherever you go anywhere, kids act like a-holes and their parents allow it. Nope. Can't tolerate that shit. He goes on. I'm loving this email. He says, our school system stopped educating kids sometime back in the 80s. They began social engineering kids to be compliant, obedient, passive social justice warriors. To get triggered and fight their battles, their teachers and professors are too cowardly to fight themselves. The educators go to cocktail parties and tell each other how wonderful they are. When they are finished virtue signaling, they suddenly have important engagement they have to go to. He says ADHD is not a disorder. In fact, it is a superpower. They say kids with ADHD cannot focus and have to be sedated. The truth is that ADHD is another form of being a kid, and those kids can hyper-focus on things they care about. Most diagnosed with ADHD and sedated are boys, and the teacher just wants them to sit down, shut up, and don't move. Our educational system is very anti-male. They want submissive, compliant, effeminate men they can control. Yes, and that is a very dangerous thing. Of course, boys are more rascals in school because boys and girls are different and how they are as children and what moves them and everything like that. But it disgusts me, the instant idea like, well, got to medicate that kid. He's hyperactive or he's this, and this. Bullshit. He's just a boy. End of story. Are there some kids that generally need some medication for very serious things? That's different. But just because the kid's, turn around looking at the squirrel outside the fucking window or he's goofing around with his buddy, that's boys being boys. Let them know there's consequences, but you don't just drug them. It's disgraceful. Problem is the teachers don't want to deal with it and the parents don't want the easy way out. He says they pound the girl power feminist nonsense into the girls' heads from kindergarten. They tell the girls that the patriarchy oppresses them. This removes any and all personal responsibility for the girls because everything is the patriarchy's fault. Girls are taught there is no difference between men and women and that the body count doesn't matter at all. When my kids were in school, they said my son had ADHD and wanted to medicate him, but I refused. Good for you, Dad. Several of the teachers gave assignments where they were required to write an essay on someone they admired, but were only allowed to write about women or women that they were a certain color. The kids were given an assignment to write someone they admire, but, oh, by the way, it has to be a woman, and potentially usually a woman of color. What a load of crap. If the boy wants to write about Benjamin Franklin, or whomever, or Abraham Lincoln, remember those guys? I'm sure a lot of kids today couldn't tell you who they were. I kid you not. But no, it has to be a woman. It's ridiculous. If a young boy wants to write about a woman that he admires, fine. But not having to do it? They do not tell these gals that men and women process the world differently. Women are emotional creatures. That's not an insult. It's just how it is. When a woman has a high body count, she has detached emotionally from any form of morality, and when any person has no moral values, it is impossible for them to have a successful relationship with the opposite sex. Yes, most know this, and I've been saying this since day one. The whole pair bonding thing. It's the fucking truth. Fathers are no longer insisting self-respect into their daughters, and these young ladies are being thrown into society they are not ready or capable of handling. Right? Both men and women are taught to view the world through emotional lenses. That makes them easily manipulated. It makes the men soft and makes the woman hard. They're told exactly what to think and believe and how to rationally and critically come to their own conclusions after considering both sides impartially. Well, a population that's uneducated and can't think, that's a population that's easy to control. Let's not forget this. They're given a set of beliefs that exclude any form of morality and ethics that taught if you embrace these things, you're one of the cool kids and morally superior to the other side. When someone has a false sense of moral superiority, they are almost impossible to reach with facts and logic. Yeah, someone that, what you describe, you can present all the facts and logic is one ear out the other. And oftentimes people like this with a superior attitude and they're superior and in the right, if they can't counter your argument, they just bombard you with insults. We need to understand that it is my generation that created these monsters. I respect that you can admit that. I've had some people try to blame me. It's like, motherfucker, I'm the tail end of Generation X. Okay? I'm not a millennial, and I didn't raise millennials, and I didn't raise Gen Z because I don't have any kids. And believe me, I think you all know that I'd be the one raising kids old school. Not the way they do now. Oh, no, no, no. We sat in our comfy chairs with remote control while we allow these extremists to take over our educational system. I don't think our current system is salvageable. I'd love to see it abolished and start over with the parents in charge. Let the parents decide if or where the kids go to school. Some say, well, then the kids won't get an education. They're getting one now, and the parents care far more about their kids than the system does. Well, kids are not getting the right education. Look at nationally the different math and the math skills, math scores, and the lack of reading skills, lack of reading scores. It's ridiculous. Lack of math scores. And you're seeing these polls people have done or random questions. You see these things on YouTube asking college kids things like, when was Pearl Harbor? Where is Pearl Harbor? What did that lead to? They can't even answer that. They're like, Pearl Harbor was that in California or something like that? Or was that in the 60s? I'm not kidding. We also need to get back to a system where kids are disciplined, not quite to the extreme. When I was a kid, we need to get back to personal responsibility and stop this victimhood nonsense. Hey, freaking men. Again, it's balance. There are consequences and there's discipline. Now, the extremes, what I went through and you went through, that is a bit much, but there's got to be a balance. I firmly believe all the division and hate in our world today is designed to keep us fighting each other while the politicians do things in secret that the public would lose their minds over. Divide and conquer. It's an age-old tactic. Do I think this will ever happen? I doubt it and hope that people prepare for some tough times ahead. However, tough times create tough men. Well, there are a lot of tough men being created every day, and I hope I can add to that in this channel. I've been married to a traditional wife for over 30 years, but we don't virtue signal about it or make TikTok videos. It's just our normal lives. Yes, my wife still does the shit test. She has since we got married. See? And does this guy sound like a pussy, gentleman? No, it's just what women do. I call her on it. I used to get upset with her, and this would cause arguments, but now I realize she does it to know that she can trust and respect me. Translation, she's testing your strength. And if you pass her test by being a leader and strong and not losing your shit over it and calling her on it, okay, he's still a leader, and she'll go back to being the pleasant, traditional wife that she is. But those shit tests never stop. My mom is, how old is my mom? Jesus, 78? I think my mom's 78. It's hard to remember. My mom pulls tests. My mom pulls tests on me, and I'm the son. And I know darn well what she's doing. I think she thinks I don't know what she's doing, but I know what she's doing. And I laugh it off, and I call her on it, and things like that, It never stops. He says, it's all about being secure, so now when she does it, I make a dad joke about it. Yeah, you laugh it off. Keep up the good work, SSM. You're reaching men of all ages with the messages they need to hear. Well, sir, that is a great story. I loved hearing about your childhood because it makes me think about my childhood and all the dumbass shit me and my friends used to do. I mean, I could do videos just telling guys all the funny stuff that I could write a screenplay about my childhood in the late 80s and 90s in my neighborhood and all that. It'd make a great movie, all the adventures we got into and all the dumbass stuff. And oh my God, I mean, but that shaped us, and I'm still alive, and there are things that if I could go back in time and say, don't do that, you moron, I would have. But there were also things from when I was a kid, and this guy, certainly we wouldn't want our kids to have to go through the bullying and the fights and everything, but in life you're going to have bullies you're going to encounter and things like that, and you got to learn to deal with them when you're young. But it also takes great parents to explain to their kids about bullies and people taking advantage of you and standing up for yourself and learning how to fight. That just shapes you for adulthood. It really is what it is. But in terms of, the young generation lost respect and lack and understanding consequences. And I respect you, sir, that you said it's my generation that effed them all up. So you're doing your part now to help fix that problem, and I'm trying to help fix that problem, but it's going to take a while. But I really hope that it might reach the point that the next generation after Gen Z sees that their parents are such weaklings, they're disgusted with that and the state of the world, and they become hardened, and you get the point. We shall see. One can hope. All right, guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. Definitely different, but I thought we'd go into cover here. If you got a great story you'd like to share, definitely email it to me, strongsuccessfulmale@gmail.com, or a good question you want to ask me in the Ask SSM series. And send it my way, strongsuccessfulmale@gmail.com, and if it's a good one, I'll definitely cover it. Just give me some time. And be sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.